Stephen Lawson, political analyst, joining us live. Do you? Did your wife listen to the show?
Occasionally, she's
better
a
than nothing.
teacher, so yeah.
All right, so she might not be listening right now. Do you have Mother's Day plans for Mrs. Lawson?
I do. I need to finalize them. I've taken care of my mom, so now I need to take care of my wife, who is also a mom.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Excellent.
You got to get ahead of it.
Welcome to the show, my friend. Good to see you. Let's start with, and I was trying to find audio from the debates here in the Peach State, but I don't know if they're proprietary and we can't play the audio, but we had no audio in the system. Who debated whom, and do we have any big takeaways from it?
Yeah, so over the last few days, we've had debates on both sides of the aisle for every constitutional statewide office up. So we've had debates in the U.S. Senate on the Republican side. Obviously, we know John Ossoff on the Democrat side is running unopposed as the incumbent. And then in the Democrat race for governor, we've had Democrats and Republicans on that. We've had it for Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, on down the circuit. By and large, I think they've been a really good glimpse for voters. I encourage you to go onto GPB's website to rewatch those. They're also airing them, replays of them. But it's a really great opportunity for voters to see all of these candidates on the same stage. So many times we see, Mark, as we've talked about, all of these ads, these sound bites, these clips.
Yeah.
But it's an hour's worth of getting to know the candidates and how they would respond and react, not only to policy questions, but to each other and differing points of view. So I think it's been really illustrated, and I encourage everybody to go check that out.
Yeah, for sure. Were there any fireworks? Were these bloody debates? Were they peaceful? What was your takeaway?
It was a mix. There was definitely fireworks in the races you would expect. So I'll start on the U.S. Senate race. Obviously, we've talked on this show about the three major candidates in that race: Congressman Mike Collins, Congressman Buddy Carter, and former football coach Derek Dooley, who, as we know, is endorsed by Governor Kemp.
Correct.
Collins and Carter definitely took the gloves off. They were sparring over ethics allegations, their time in Congress.
With each other.
Okay. Really left Derek Dooley unscathed, which is a little ironic because I think he's probably the least known to any Georgia voters. But it gave him an opportunity to kind of just put his message out there. Obviously, Congressman Collins talked about his work with the Lake and Riley Act and his work in Congress, and Congressman Carter talked about his experience in the pharmaceutical industry and his work in the 1st District. But lots of fireworks between those two congressmen.
Interesting. Okay. So that's one I need to go watch.
Need to go watch that. On the race for governor, obviously we had both Democrats and Republicans talking. So I'll start with the Democrats. Obviously we know former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is really in the pole position there. But it was interesting seeing those other candidates, Mark. We've talked about who could potentially slip into second. It was a really important debate for Jason Estevez, I thought.
Yeah.
I thought he probably emerged as probably the second really in command there in that race.
Okay.
It gave him an opportunity to flex his policy chops. We'll see if what kind of dividends it played, but I thought it was also a strong showing from former DeKalb CEO Michael Thurmond, and then of course you have former Republican Jeff Duncan in that race as well.
What was his performance like, the former lieutenant governor?
I think
Did they treat him like an outsider on stage? Like, hey, we're three lifelong Democrats. Who is this Zeke joining us on stage?
There was definitely some of that sparring between Jason Estevez and Jeff Duncan on that issue about credibility, right?
Yeah.
You've been a lifelong Republican. How can we trust you to be running as a Democrat for governor? So clearly they're seeing the polling. They know that it's a fight for second place, and they're all
and that
for it.
Still amazes me. Because when the candidates announced, I looked at the field and I'm like, I don't see a clear front runner. And I was wrong because Keisha Lance Bottoms is polling way above Estevez and Thurman and Jeff Duncan. And without really spending any money, anecdotally, I got a Keisha Lance Bottoms mailer at the house yesterday. I'd see, and it was like not like a one pager.
Full page.
It was like a fold. Like it was a hefty. And I've gotten, I think Estevez. I've gotten a bunch from Jackson and Chris Carr sent me. But it was the first like Keisha Lance Bottoms sign for me that they're spending any money. So I don't know if they were just biding their time and now they're kind of starting to spend a little money in this race.
I think what you're seeing is that she's had the luxury of being the front runner for so long in this race that she has not had to spend money. And we've talked about it, Mark. The other candidates in that race are not spending any money to force her to spend money,
or at least he's spending money to get to second and get to a runoff.
Yeah, so I think it's really going to be up in the air who that second place finisher is. I would say this: don't count out former DeKalb CEO Michael Thurmond. Obviously, he was the CEO of really a Democrat stronghold in DeKalb County and has run statewide before. So I think would not surprise me to see him sneak in a second place.
What I find interesting about this, and again, I'm not a political analyst, you are, so I'm going to throw this against the wall and see what sticks. Estevez, Thurmond, Duncan. So Estevez, state senator, Thurmond, more a longer political resume. Jeff Duncan, lieutenant governor, but he was a Republican. The only candidate that had any tie to the Biden administration was Keisha Lance Bottoms, which I think would be a negative in this election. Like, oh, you worked for Sleepy Joe Biden, but apparently that is not a drag on her thus far.
It hasn't been, and it's a really interesting question because I get this question rhetorically from my Democrat friends. Is like, how in the world is she so far ahead in this race?
Yeah.
Given that, not just that, Mark, but also her tenure as mayor of Atlanta, which a lot of people think was not a good one.
But to me, that's a metro-ish issue, maybe even tighter than that. Like, she only, didn't run for re-election. But statewide, like, she worked for the Joe Biden presidency. And is she going to be asked the question, you were there, was he with it? When I asked her that question when he was sued. I'm like, you worked in the Biden administration. Did you see any signs of, mental failings or any, and, that's a question I think that should be asked.
And she's going to get asked it. Where she's not going to get asked that question, Mark, is in a Democrat primary because there are that is not kosher. I think in that primary setting. The other thing we have to remember is she's the only woman running in this primary.
Good point.
And the base of the Democratic Party is African American women, and I think they are resonating with her campaign. Really, also outside of Atlanta, to your point, because it's more than just Atlanta. So I think that's why you're seeing her do so well in that primary.
All right, let's save the granddaddy for last. The debate for Republican nominee for governor.
Yeah, that is where I think we saw the most fireworks, not unexpected, to be sure. We've talked about on the show, Mark, the sparring and the negative attacks between Burt Jones and Rick Jackson, and that was fully on display for an hour the other night. Really there were 8 people on stage, but really the focus was on those two. They got into some heated exchanges. Of course, closely mirroring what we've seen in these ads. There's some accusations from Burt Jones towards Rick Jackson about illegal immigration. There was some counters from the Jackson camp to Burt Jones about some pay-to-play and conflicts of interest. And then you had Attorney General Chris Carr piling on Burt Jones as well. So lots of back and forth. Brad Raffensperger tried to stay in his lane, but lots of really interesting dynamics. I still think that race is between Jackson and Jones. I think it's going to a runoff.
Is it a two-person race?
It's a two-person race by all accounts. I think we're going to get some more polling later this week from a pretty credible source. So I think on all of these races we're going to have a better picture, but I think that's a runoff that's heading to a 4-week runoff in June, and I think it's going to be an all-out knockout brawl between those two gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. We're getting closer and closer. In fact, early voting started. I saw you voted. You did not reveal your ballot as I asked you on Instagram to do. Do we have any early voting numbers yet?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we've seen a lot of surge in momentum. We've had over 70,000 people already vote in just 2 days of early voting. And through the first day, Mark, we saw a 29% increase this year over what we saw the first day in 2022. That to me shows that people are tuned in. People understand that every constitutional office in this state is up, the importance of voting. And I think you're going to see that trend continue. I think we're going to set another record for a midterm election here in Georgia. And I think it just shows also, this failed notion that it's somehow difficult to vote or that we don't have enough early voting. We've got 2 weeks of early voting. I would encourage everybody to get out, make your voice heard, and cast your ballot because there's so many opportunities
don't put it
to
off.
do it. Don't put it off.
Yeah. So just because there have been questions like what is going to happen with the Georgia's voting procedures, your experience early voting, it's the same as the last election. Like we're still doing the touchscreen kind of booth action and
yes,
you put in the card, it prints it out. Like nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed from the last two elections in terms of 2024 and 2022.
Okay.
It is a seamless process. We've got a great voting system here in Georgia right now. That makes it very easy. Now there are questions moving forward, next cycle, and certainly the contract that Dominion has for these machines is set to expire, I believe, in 2027 or 2028, and they'll look at other vendors at that time. But right now, it's an easy process.
All right. Dentons.com for all things Stephen Lawson. We were supposed to ask you a question, and I forgot yesterday. We're like, we got to ask Stephen Lawson. So I might text it to you a little bit later.
Send it into the mailbag.
There you go. All right. Good stuff, as always, political analyst Stephen Lawson. When we come back, updating